having this conversation, and here's the connection toolkit, connection before content, etc. from we and me. But we had planned on having this conversation. Last time we met, Jennifer Pierce shared integrated MTSS. There is now in this integrated MTSS research network funded by the Department of Education, IES specifically. One of their activities is to create an assessment. And so she shared with us the IMTSS assessment last time. And we have that recorded if you want to go back and see that. You can, it's freely available. You can request it. You just have to go to the website, which I don't, I'll find that in just a second. I didn't have it up right then, but I do have up what we're going to discuss today. And so today is continuing, we're going to continue on that conversation about this. So this is the checklist for purposeful integration. That's part of the integrated MTSS. And so we are going to talk about that. I think we're a small enough group and just the way things are going that we'll probably have a conversation as a group. I also have a little presentation that I put together that I can go through really, really quickly related to the topic. And I'm giving the presentation at CSEP's Active States Forum next week. And so I thought maybe I could just quick bounce through it with you all. Gives me a little practice, gives you a little information. I thought it could be helpful. But before we do that, I did want you all to be made aware of a new resource on SIG Network. And that is Oklahoma's MTSS scope and sequence. So Alexa is on with us from Oklahoma, and I can show you where this lives. I'm curious before, I have to log in to see this page, John. That's interesting. I'm going to work on that for a second.
Odd. I will work on that also.
Okay. But in the meantime, while we are working on that, Alexa, first of all, before you speak, I wanted to ask a real quick question of the group. Has your state, for whatever you're doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be MTSS, but has your state created a professional development or professional learning scope and sequence that lays out the topics, the content folks are going to learn, when they're going to learn it, what platform they'll learn it on, any assessments related to it or measures related to it? I'm just curious if folks will share what that looks like for them.
Are you asking us to respond to that now, Dr. Coffey?
Yeah, please.
Well, so we don't have one that's coming directly from RIDE, but we have one of our strong partners, MTSS RI, who we partner with on multiple grants, including SPDIG and other federal grants. They have a whole series of courses, free course modules on a Moodle-based platform, and it's all about MTSS, and it's quite detailed. And we've worked with all these, national, leaders that many of us know, Devin Kearns, for example, we've partnered with the NCSI and NCSI and NCII on various resources. Anyways, I'll drop that link in.
Okay, that would be great. And have you found it helpful to have it laid out that way? Has that worked so far?
Well, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of our educators in the state have completed those courses, and we continue to leverage those courses as foundational, course material as we're engaging in other initiatives. When we have our virtual communities of practice, we're often sending people off to take those courses. Yeah.
Good.
But it's not coming directly from RIDE, right? So that's why I'm kind of saying, yes, we've got this, but it's not coming from the SCA directly.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. And Amanda, is there anything else you want to say about what you're developing? Virginia's developing?
So Virginia has always had a scope and sequence. I guess around the time of COVID, especially with changing and different, we kind of started transitioning and realizing that our existing scope and sequence could use an overhaul. So we worked with Steve Goodman and Kim Yannick, I think, from PBIS, And they helped lead a team at the state level where we had a kind of a mixture of people at the table, from state leadership to our systems coaches and so on, to kind of revamp the scope and sequence. And it's actually interesting that you asked about that, because like it's literally, we're just starting to roll it out. Like they're just starting to bring what's been done and starting to roll out like a map of how this is going to work and how it's both supporting divisions and creating sustainability and how everything's coordinated.
Good.
So, yeah, we've always had one, but we've a huge overhaul. Like it's completely still using some of the same core pieces, but just really newly, like we realized what we had wasn't quite working or meeting our needs anymore. And so our state has really gone through a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
Some
Could you,
outside support.
were there any, like one or two specific improvements that you could name, things that are modernized because of what we've learned about professional development?
Well, I know that we've kind of they've redefined the core components of like our MTSS work. And one of the things that's been going in there is being more, I feel like, proactive. So when we first started doing some of this work, we were training our systems coaches who were supporting our divisions.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically learning the material right as they're teaching the divisions in the schools. So this
Right.
new scope and sequence has in it about they get it first, like how they're getting it, and they're getting it within division coaches.
Mm.
So then they can both support the schools and districts. So like there's a little bit more of a thought on sustainability and trying to make sure, there's a common understanding, and then how it flows across the cascade from there.
Right. Good.
But yeah,
Good.
so
That's good. I mean, when you think of plan, do, study, act, when you think about improvement cycles, you should be making changes, right? We learn a lot about how to do professional development better every year, I think. And we learn a lot about, MTSS components that are research based or that, fit best with the needs of the schools. So
and they've been using some of the data to help them with this improvement effort and everything. And
good.
some of those pieces that we've learned about what works and what doesn't work is being integrated. They just haven't built the content like necessarily. We have a curriculum team that helps build the content, but
Mm-hmm.
we're just generating the actual scope and sequence. Like really was just shared with us at the leadership level, like the state,
Yeah.
recently within a month or so. So
Yeah.
it's really being just rolled out now.
Yeah. And I have to say, on the federal side of things, I feel like a place where I wish I had done better is having, and Kevin's been part of this conversation before, so but I wish we had been better about creating something nationally that people could use so that it didn't have to be built in every single state. It was just a challenge we never really successfully responded to, but it is what it is. So Alexa, do you want to talk at all about your scope and sequence while I show it, or do you want to speak a
Sure.
little bit about it first before I do show it?
Sure. So our scope and sequence really was designed by my predecessor, Kristen Perez-Rickles, and the intention behind it and how we are utilizing it is our particular districts that we serve, they participate directly with it. It's part of their requirements to utilize this platform. But it is available and open for anyone in the state to utilize and participate in this sequence as well. And then we have communities of practice that bring the scheduled content to a live experience, because sometimes I think when we're doing asynchronous learning, we miss that piece of being together and having those conversations together. And so it matches with the same timeline as our professional development sequence, that they would access these resources. Sometimes, so also some contextual things to note is that in probably January of this past year, our special education director announced that Oklahoma would be moving away from traditional discrepancy model for eligibility for SLD. And that we would be moving away from that, and we would have until 2032 to start to implement any of those processes that are necessary for districts to adjust as they are making that transition. So in January, our groups that had joined the course and had joined the communities of practice suddenly spiked because everyone heard MTSS, and they were all originally listed in the listserv as MTSS communities of practice, like put on by SPNAG, but our numbers had massively adjusted. So when we're thinking about these pieces for next year, we need to be cognizant of a large group of people that are participating in a new way that were not previously participating, which is fantastic. Fantastic problem to have, but also something to consider in the longevity of the resource and the ability to maintain high quality of that resource.
Absolutely. And this has happened, I just want to give a comparison. This has happened in a lot of states with literacy, right? When all of a sudden there was a law in the state that everyone had to learn the science of reading, and SPIG, tap into the SPIG, which we want, but it can be difficult to temper expectations. And if you've been deeply involved in professional development, like you all have been, you understand how long it takes to reach everybody and the kind of money it takes and the et cetera. And most people don't have that understanding. Certainly most legislators don't, right? So that's challenging.
Right. They say, have a PD ready by August, and it's July.
Well, I know, and it's as if you like take the PD off the shelf. You're like, here you go,
Right.
and hand it to someone, and they're like, oh, I get it. And they walk out.
Even though we don't know who these audience members are. Anyway, so our original design really was for audience members that were going to have quite a bit of support, either with SPIDAG or with another grant or another project. They were going to have some level of support to access this information and to be able to make the final products. But since then, we've had quite a few who have participated that did not necessarily fit the targeted audience, I suppose.
Okay, so you start with team foundations, and you had, so the asynchronous learning was team foundations, the synchronous learning was at the summer conference. You had knowledge outcomes, skill outcomes, coaching and implementation activities, final product. So that you got a written vision, communication plan, coaching plan. This is totally my kind of language because it's very like, you understand what's going to happen. There are pieces that you can take away and say, oh, this is, they understood it because they showed us this way. So they have the skills. Anything else you want to say about these different categories, or anything about this, Alexa?
No, I think it was really helpful for us to organize it this way because it helped to align what we were doing in the district with what they were doing independently in some way or with their team. And then as we move into our second year with these same schools, we can revisit these final products, we can revisit these permanent creations and be sure that we're doing this now on a site level instead of a district level.
Right. Yep, that's a big jump. Good. So communication throughout the system, matching existing resources to student needs. There was a data retreat. That's great. Data use across all levels. And the synchronous was coaching and data teams and meetings. So this synchronous here, this is for coaches.
Yeah, that experience would be coaches, but that particular month, I guess, that data retreat last year we offered it twice, so it ended up being in this same month for some of the participants.
Yeah. Right. Yep. I like how just really, I had a good word for it that was in my head. But I like, how discreet it is. Like these, these are the things that are going to happen. And it's really not very ambiguous. It's straightforward. Evidence-based instructional practices within MTSS. Now, really, that could be a 3-year plan, right? Just getting at all the EBPs that go within MTSS. So how have you all been able to encapsulate it into the scope and sequence?
Yes, so that's actually where we'll take our year 2 and beyond, is we're gonna build out a specific tier 1, 2, 3 for behavior, tier 1 through 3 for literacy, tier 1, 2, 3 for math. And that's where those pieces will be. We've determined that because we want it to be somewhat open platform, it won't have like prerequisites like a course would, where they need to complete them in order. It will be like, we use Canvas as our learning management system. And so it will be like each module will be a required component for that piece, but they can kind of jump around between the tiers to access the information that they need to access for that specific piece. And then those that are being coached, their sites will have access to the one area that is their focus for that year. So 3 of our sites, their focus is behavior. So they'll use the behavior module, and then their district will start with the next component, the next area, which they'd like to focus on.
Right. Any questions so far about what Alexa shared, including the evidence-based practices plan?
What's the mechanism? Do you have cohort schools that agree up front that this is the sequence they'll run through with you? Because they're the schools, is it a pilot? Or is it just broadly offered to the state and whoever wants to come, comes? Is the expectation that you have a defined group of participants in a project who will do all of this in the order that you're delivering it?
Good question. So kind of a little bit of everything. We have 4 districts that we've identified through the grant application process that when they receive coaching, they commit also to completing this ask. And so as they're completing coaching, it aligns with what they're receiving with their coach to give them the background knowledge prior to the coach's support, so that they can kind of ask those additional questions, ask those pieces, have the products that they need to kind of determine any edits or areas in which they need further support.
And that's
And
in
then
4 districts?
We have 4 districts for 2 years, and then we'll take on another 4. We'll rotate them off. So
And their coaches are project funded?
their coaches are project funded, yes. So we utilize some external specialists, and then we have employed 2 coaches that take on 1 each, or 2 districts each.
That's a nice ratio.
Yes, and 2 of the districts are larger. I would say they're medium. They're not the largest in the state, but they're larger. They each have about 9 to 12 school sites.
Right.
And then 2 of them are small with either 2 school sites, like a elementary, middle, high, or an elementary, secondary. So it's
And in the
split in
big
that way.
districts, they're doing it district-wide?
They are doing it district-wide. I'm looking at my notes on the wall. They are doing it district-wide, but there's nuances to some of the secondary split between elementary.
Thank you.
And then
question.
statewide, they can, this is on an open access platform held by the state. So they can enroll and do it by themselves, but there's a disclaimer kind of at the beginning that's kind of indicates, who the audience should be, and it's not something that someone should just jump in and join alone. They really need a team to do this together if they're going to do it apart from the coaching aspect.
Yeah. Do not try this at home.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Self-implemented MTSSI.
All right, evaluation of evidence-based practices, unpacking the standards and building formative assessments. Yeah, I always think it's fascinating. Formative assessments has some of the most significant research support, and it's like no one gets that learning seemingly. It's not that, I mean, it's not easy, but it's not that hard. So it's just a weird, it's just not sexy. I don't know why it's never become a bigger thing.
Tedious process.
Maybe that's it. Decision rules, database individualization. We love that. Evaluation of progress. There's a lot. I'm seeing a lot for our evaluators to love here. Any questions for Alexa?
Well, we'll be able to get access to that, right? It's an exemplar, I think.
Yeah, it's on the SIG Network site, and I put it into the chat. If you have
Oh.
trouble reaching it, let me know though, because we
Okay.
just, everything's changing on the website.
Okay.
Alexa, can
Jennifer, let me
I,
make a plug for the website right now. On the website, if you go to resource library, and then once you click on that, you'll have the option to sort resources by topic. Within that is evidence-based professional development, I believe is the.
Yeah. So resource library, and then resource topic, evidence-based professional development. So you could look
press
up.
apply. Yep, or just press apply, and that'll pull up all of the resources related to that
Yeah.
topic.
I'll see if this works. Just because it's a good test. Oh, I did not.
Put in OK, Oklahoma. Just OK.
Okay.
And it should come up.
Yep, there we are. Okay. And then if we look just generally at evidence-based practices or evidence-based professional development, subtopics, adult learning, assessment for planning, continuous improvement, effective PD, engagement, culturally and linguistically, professional evaluating, family engagement, guidance, administrators, research best practices, resources for parents, sequence. All right. Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any last questions for Alexa?
I do have a question.
Sure.
It sounds like we have something extremely similar to you all in Montana. We have our modules and things divided up by BITS, Building Implementation Team, and then DITS, District Implementation Teams. And we want them to do the DITS first. But my question is your stuff designed where they would get at least an overview of everything that they need to know within one school year? Is that how it's designed? Because ours is much slower than that.
Yes, so ours is really for that one school year because we have 2 years of implementation with the district. So the first year is really a lot, very heavy with the district so that we can coach them into selecting what practices and what things they want to implement for that first year. And then the second year, they really implement all of those things at the site while we support them with the coaching practice at year 2 for whatever is the next domain they want to focus on, whether that's literacy, math, behavior, something they haven't selected. So then they have this practice, they have heavy coaching year 1, practice with support year 2, and then year 3, we're just able to be connected with them kind of informally. They can reach out for support, but they really are expected to do that third one with the tools and the permanent products that we've supported them with for years 1 and 2. And then we would take on additional sites in that third year, and our original sites could possibly be demonstration sites. It's intended that they would be demonstration sites, but I don't want to say that, because something may happen and we may determine that they are no longer a great demonstration site, but it is intended that they would be demonstration sites for those areas that they had marked improvement for.
Okay, thank you.
Who writes your curriculum?
We utilize a lot of support from NCII, AIR, in CSI, but ultimately it's our internal team that is writing all of the material and creating all of the material. We did utilize the DBI module from DBI, and we have some university partners that have supported authoring some of our pieces as well in alignment with other grants and previous FDAG, so that we're not necessarily remaking anything that already exists. But it has been an internal work effort to populate this information succinctly and with the needs of the audience.
SPDIG funded folks or state employees?
I would say everything that's been authored has been SPDIG funded folks, except for the 1 month that I had a lot of employee turnover and then asked for some support from one person who is not a SPDIG funded folk, but typically SPDIG funded folk.
This is great. Alexa, it's so nice to have something concrete to start the conversation. Thank you for being willing to share it. And I think it would be great, Amanda and Mary, if you're willing to share, get a little more in depth in yours in the coming months. Your, not necessarily scope and sequence, but how you're laying things out, Mary. And then Amanda, what you were talking about earlier. Folks feel comfortable. It's just a nice way to get at, because MTSS is so big and it's hard to start the conversation sometimes. Where do you start? And this is a nice concrete way to do that. So Alexa, thank you very much. That was great. Good. All right. So the other conversation for today is about, it's a continuation of the conversation we started when Jennifer Pierce shared with us about IMTSS. So that again is the Integrated Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And there's a research network funded by IES, which is the US Department of Ed. It's our research arm. And this network is a number of different universities. The specific project that's creating an assessment for MTSS integrated MTSS fidelity is by University of Missouri, AIR, who's the other one? Can you guys see it? I forget the other group. So Jennifer Pierce and Allison Gandy specifically did this section of it. Again, this was Jennifer's presentation last time, so I won't go into that part. But the part that we said we were going to talk about this time is purposeful integration. And when they talk about purposeful integration, they talk about integrating academics with social, emotional, and behavior supports into a MTSS framework. And so some of the questions that they have, that there are school-wide and class-wide social, emotional, behavior supports in the MTSS. Having folks having access to social, emotional, and behavior supports, interventions and strategies, and training staff on those. Ensuring that for students who have multiple needs, there are academic and social, emotional, behavior. Why would there be a W there? Social behavior, well-being, maybe? Not sure. Supports for students who have multiple needs. When creating the schedule for assessments, are both academic and social, emotional, and behavior supports considered? Are all relevant staff able to access and view data for both academics and social, emotional behavior? Are data organized in a way that allows teams to make decisions for all of those areas? For database decision-making, do the team procedures prioritize reviewing and making decisions for both those academic and social, emotional behavior data? And during the process, do we ask how a student's behavioral skill set may be impacting academics and vice versa? So I have a few immediate reactions to these questions, and it's a little bit like when 20 years ago, when I was working at an SEA, if you had told me that we'd still be having conversations about moving beyond a discrepancy model for learning disabilities, I would not have believed it, because I thought that was going to happen like then, right? IDA came out and I was like, oh, this is happening now. We're all doing this thing now. And it's been a process. That's not wrong. It's just really interesting. And at the same time, 20 years ago, if you had told me we'd still have to be having the conversation that behavior impacts academics, I would have been surprised. So those are my first reactions to this checklist and having the conversation about this. And I'm curious as to your reactions to this checklist about what it means for your MTSS, anything that stands out for you.
Jennifer, I agree with your statement. I take it one step further. And to the start of my career, you know, when my teaching license, the ink wasn't even dry yet. And I am absolutely dumbfounded that for some bizarre reason, we have to teach educators to be relational with the students and family caregivers that they serve. Um, I will never understand that, because to me, education, the very core, I mean, the very, you know, your gut, in this profession is relationality.
Right.
Um, so, and I look back, I don't know. I'm just, you know, there was so much, you know, even when I was a child in school and in my first, you know, decades teaching, um, these behavioral concepts were just innately woven into the general core curriculum. And obviously, you know, with your younger students, you know, educators use trade books. So if we were talking, you know, behaviors that we wanted children to emulate and to embrace, we modeled them as educators, but we used story. We didn't have to have multiple checklists and teachers jumping through hoops, and it was just part of who you were as an educator, and I'm not sure where we got all upside down on this.
I think I know. It was the swing and not, and I'm not trying to finger point at all, because
Yeah.
I remember No Child Left Behind, and it really was, the intention really was, because I was there as an intern at that point, but I was there, and Bush 2 and his Secretary of Education, Spelling, really did want the kids who were being just assumed that they couldn't do it. They wanted to give them a chance. They really did. And so it swung all the way in this direction of, we're going to make sure you give those kids a chance, because we're going to test and we're going to do this, we're going to do this. So it was all the right intention, but it did swing things over here, right? From, we trust you, you're going to have good relations with your students, you're going to do all this, to, we're going to assess you, we're going to hold you accountable, and what was felt to be a big stick as opposed to carrots or, you know, anything else. So I think it was in response to that, at least partially.
Yeah, I can see that. Because I also have always felt that around that time I was an education professor for one of our Montana universities. And I would often, you know, talk to students about how it was being misinterpreted, that it wasn't meant to, you know, beat compliance into educators or students, but that somewhere along the line, there was a significant number of students who had been identified as needing stronger supports. and that it was meant for us to open our eyes and recognize that every child was worthy in our classrooms, no matter where that classroom's locale was. And that somewhere we'd gotten upside down, with, you know, shaming educators and, you know, and I would say, you know, it's leading to these horrific numbers of things like disproportionality and, you know,
I would also say that's been around forever, right? Like, so that disproportionality, I both, because I do think there, as a teacher, I was sitting in the lounge and hearing people say, well, you know, that's that kid, that's that family, etc. I remember those conversations, right? So we had to change that conversation.
mhm.
And we also learned a lot about behavior and social emotional over time. So it's like there was a pendulum swing over here, and you kind of have to start bringing it together, kind of the old ways, the new ways, and everything we've learned in between. And do you all think this is a good indicator of that? Bringing in what we've learned over time and about the social emotional and behavior and the academic and how you support those and how you use data. Do you all think does this give you anything new? Is there anything that would be useful for your districts and schools in this checklist? Does it take the conversation any further?
I think the checklist is solid. Um, and, you know, should hopefully allow for some really candid conversations amongst staff. If we can't be honest with each other and respectful, and to say everything from I think we got this, we're rocking it, and here's why we're rocking it, to the very opposite, we're still lacking here, and here. If we can't converse like that with each other in the safety of our professional, um, you know, groups, whether it's in the K-12 setting or the state setting, um, then perhaps therein lies the problem.
Yeah, thanks for that. I did not do my presentation, as you may have noticed, because we got into a really good conversation about the scope and sequence, and a few other things. And so if it's okay with everyone, it does continue this conversation about integration. And again, it's quick, so I can start off next time with that. And then Amanda and Mary, let's see, Amanda's here. Mary had to go. So, but Amanda, if you're willing to share next time, you can email me and we can talk about it offline. And
If
that's
not
it.
me, I can ask if one of my colleagues, because I didn't have anything to do with creating of the new scope and sequence. I've just kind of gotten a glimpse at
Right,
it.
right.
I can ask one of them if they would be willing to talk about it.
That'd be great. Thank you, Amanda. And thanks everyone for being really involved. We got both Kevins today, which was great. And everyone else, thanks for telling the story of your name or your story generally. And we'll see you next month. And thanks, Alexa, for sharing your scope and sequence.
Everyone, I'm just going to kind of just jumping off that checklist item. I dropped a link into the chat. If you're curious, our team has, maybe Jennifer, maybe Amy's already shared this with your group, with this group, but it is a survey, the value implementation scale that all staff in the building does.
Oh, okay.
Inclusive of all the areas. And that way, because we discovered that leadership teams sometimes are echo chambers.
And I'll ask if we could add this to SIG Network.
Okay.
Can we
Yeah.
add it to SIG Network, John?
Say that again?
Do we add that to SIG Network, that
Oh,
resource?
certainly from my point of
Okay.
view, I thought you would ask,
Well, I think Kevin's okay with it, right? Since he shared it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's publicly available, and Amy Gumbers can that talks about that also includes how our data system collects it, but it's great.
Excellent. Well, thanks. I'm so glad you shared that. And thanks everyone for a good conversation. Thank you, John, for organizing us. And I will see you all soon.
Take care.
Okay.
thank you,
Bye.
Jennifer.